What's up, people? Today we're going to dig deep. Today we hang with grief and loss expert Kendra Zierau and talk about working through grief and learning how to live in your new normal after loss. Whether the loss is losing a loved one, divorce, loss of health, a big transition, or whatever it may be. Kendra discusses how to adapt to it with personal and professional insight. So tune in. Don't miss what Kendra has to say.
5.5 years ago, I was shot multiple times and I was diagnosed with a spinal cord injury. Well, at that moment, I didn't know how drastic my life was about to change. And it didn't change for the worse, but it changed for the better.
I was talking with my palliative care doctor today, and she turned around to me and she looked at me and she was like, do you think that if you keep on doing all these things that you'll eventually beat this? And I was sort of like, actually, yeah, that's probably what I'm trying to do.
Well, I know what my body's going to do to me. I've got a wheelchair in my future, but you know what I've been looking for?
What's that?
One with off-road wheels.
No, nothing will ever take away the pain of my daughter not being here. My reality.
If you could go back to that day, February 18, 1990, and change what happened, my honest answer is I wouldn't change it because if I didn't get hurt that day, I wouldn't be in front of that school. I wouldn't be in front of the schools in the upcoming weeks, or I wouldn't be talking with you. This is just my journey, and it's given me an opportunity to have a profound impact on a lot of people and inspire and change lives.
You can expect life to kick you in the teeth, but you always get back up no matter what, and you just keep going.
Living Adaptive with Scott Davidson, a podcast about learning to live adaptively.
All right, so we're going to jump right into this. Kendra Zierau is a well-respected grief coach, and she speaks to various audiences on the subject of grief and loss. She's also a life and health coach with a holistic approach. Kendra's involved in a bunch of other things, and you can learn more about Kendra Zierau by looking in the show notes for links to her site and social media accounts. Kendra is sharing her story by providing a glimpse into dealing with grief after loss. Her advice is practical and applies to many of the complicated facets of life. So what's up, Kendra? Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be with you today.
Nice. So you're a grief coach, life coach, health and wellness coach. What led you into this coaching and specifically grief coaching?
Oh my goodness. Well, I have been a coach for many years. I actually was a high school tennis coach for a lot of years and a teacher by trade. But when about 10 years ago, my husband was out of the blue diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic colon cancer. And we went through treatment. In 10 months from diagnosis, he passed away, and I became a young widow with 3 young kids, and really had my whole life just kind of turn upside down. And I had to kind of figure out how to rebuild my life, and definitely had developed some bad habits and just survival skills, and realized that I had suffered quite a bit and felt called to come alongside other people in their suffering and just walk through kind of sometimes these dark times with people. So because of that desire and that passion to help people, went back, got some education, and became a certified grief coach so that I could have the skills and the tools to really help people. And so now I get to work with people all over the world, actually. So it's pretty great for me.
Nice. So I'm reminded of something you wrote, which you also say in a video. I got to link up your video. I'll link it to our website, so they'll jump over to your site and see the video and social media. I definitely do that on Facebook. Instagram's a little bit more difficult to put up web links, but you wrote, May 21st will always be the day I remember every little detail, from the last breath he took to waking my babies up and telling them their dad had died, and holding them as they sobbed, begging him to come back, to calling family members, to gathering at our house, to praying and beginning the first day of a new life as a widow, and all that entails. That's right there. That I think that makes you more capable than most in this realm of grief coaching, because you've been there.
Yeah, really, truly, one of the most horrific days of my life. And as a parent, right, you as a human being, and then as a parent, you have moments in life, and I know every single human being will have them. They'll just look different for each person. But you have this moment where you, as a woman and as a wife, I had just lost my husband, and the grief and the pain was so overwhelming. And then on top of that, I had to tell my children, who were young at the time, and it was those moments that are unfortunately forever frozen in my mind of just how painful, honestly, how painful life can be at this, on this, on earth. And I am a pretty positive person, and I'm pretty good at working, just kind of, I have a positive outlook on things. And that was a day that forever changed my world, because I had to figure out how to be a single mom. I had become a widow, help my children, focus on them, help them to grieve, and all these things that I really felt totally ill-equipped to do. But you have to, because you have innocent children counting on you, and nobody else could do it for you. So it was a pretty awful time in my life.
I bet. I'm reminded of a quote from one of my favorite bands, and they say, dying isn't tragic, it's an effing catastrophe. And it, in this case, yeah, for sure. But grieving, I think grieving doesn't just limit itself to bereavement, death. I think it also goes into the realm of losing. We have a lot of spinal cord injuries, a lot of issues that can happen, amputations, whatever it may be, or trauma, and loss happens there. Is that a realm you also deal into?
Absolutely. One of the things that happened when I was losing my husband and we knew that he was dying was that my friends and people in my life would say, oh, well, I don't want to share with you what's going on in my life because it's not as bad as the fact that your husband's dying. And what I began to realize, and truly where my heart is that loss and grief happens in so many different ways. So it can be something like divorce is a huge loss. And anytime your world is totally rocked and your life is totally changed and something happens that you aren't prepared for or that causes deep pain, that is loss. That's financial. I work with people with financial issues, with medical issues, with, like I said, divorce, with issues with kids who are addicts and run away. I mean, the loss, happens in so many different ways, and it can certainly happen with, issues with the human body when you can't use your body like you've always done. So it's a pretty far-reaching, grief is pretty far-reaching and affects at some point every single person in this life.
For sure.
So that's what motivated me to go get trained so that I could help people, regardless of whether they've lost a spouse or not. Every single person will experience deep loss of some kind and the grief associated with that.
To deal with grief and become a grief coach, is it almost a prereq that you have to go through something so you can really empathize, or is it something that you don't necessarily have to?
Well, I think you have to have gone through loss of some kind. Yes, because you have to be able to empathize with people. Again, I haven't dealt with a spinal cord injury, for example, or I haven't dealt with a debilitating disease that forever changes my life, but I can still connect with people who do. And some of my clients have dealt with that or are dealing with that, but I can understand. I do believe that human pain is universal when it comes to grief and loss. It's expressed in different ways. We heal in different ways. But once you've experienced a loss of some kind and beginning in the stages of grief, if you will, then you're a part of a club that we all understand each other. Our circumstances just may be different. So, I think anyone who's gone through loss and can really articulate that process or is able to dive into that process and find some healing and explore it and go to the depths of it can then turn around and help other people if that's something that they feel called to do. Yeah.
Now, you talked about understanding, and I think of misunderstanding when I hear that. What was in your process when you're going through the grieving process? What is something that jumps out to you when I ask or say, what was the greatest misunderstanding you encountered when people approached you or discussed the passing of your husband?
Oh, that's a really great question. I have a couple of things. One thing that was really interesting to me is how people don't know what to say or do in loss. So that looks a variety of different ways, but sometimes people wouldn't even address the fact that I had just lost my husband. And that is strange to me because I know it's awkward to talk about, because what if someone starts crying, or not everybody knows how to deal with it. But that was surprising to me that people didn't talk to me about it sometimes afterwards. Another thing was, I live in a small community, and it's a little suburban town, and very family oriented. And all of a sudden, of course, I have my close friends who were so loyal and so good to me, but there was a lot of people that all of a sudden, when I became a single woman and a single mom, like I stopped getting invited to things. And there was, not only was this loneliness of starting to do life again without my husband, but then like people in the community, like didn't, like if it was a couples thing, that I wouldn't get invited to stuff. So that was really surprising that was really weird to me. And we were like super involved in our community. My husband was, a Little League coach for my son and his team. He was a soccer coach for my girls. He was, we were involved in ministry at the church. We were totally involved. And all of a sudden, I feel like there was a little bit of isolation. And as I've worked with clients over the years, I have found that this is somewhat common. And so it's been this really interesting thing that, of course, if people go through different stuff, it's something that I'm so aware of, that I, one, talk directly to people about their loss, and however they respond. But number two, I'm still inclusive of people when they've had a massive life change like that, because it was actually really painful for me.
It does seem like trauma causes people to kind of back away. It seems like, right, like you said, they don't know what to say. Like, I'm so sorry, then what's next? And it's not necessarily maybe I want to exclude, but maybe I just don't know what to do.
Yes, I think, and that's where I had to come to. Like, I don't think it was personal towards me, but although it felt it, but I think you're exactly right. It's because people don't know what to say. And most people, I moved into this town with my husband, and people didn't really know. I mean, they knew me, but then now what happens when Kendra's not married and with her husband? You know what I mean? I think people, here's the deal. I also tell my clients and people, grief makes people act really weird. They just act weird. Family
Sure.
members act weird. Friends act weird. People act weird. And there's not always like an explanation or a way to deal with it. It's just part of grief. And sometimes just knowing that makes you go, okay, and you just have a little more grace for people.
Gotcha.
Or you just choose not to spend time with those people. Could be a combination of both,
Yeah, anytime a chapter closes, it does seem like it's time to reassess where we are with community relationships, everything, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's okay. That's all part of the process.
Yeah, I think so. I think any sort of traumatic situation, there's a big process that goes, and that's part of it. But you would, in your realm, you've seen it way more than most, I'm sure, especially as a grief coach. When I think of going through your situation, we talked about this briefly before the interview, but what's a bad habit you did when you were dealing with grief, and what did you learn from this bad habit?
So I have learned so much about myself, but I am a doer and I am a pretty positive person. So as I had to rebuild my life, then I became fully aware of my responsibilities. Like I had to, I was, I worked part-time in the schools as a teacher, but mostly a stay-at-home mom. So I had to go back and become the full-time breadwinner. I had to, I'm the one that was like, I'll be totally involved with my kids in their sports. From my personality, I developed this sense that because my children had lost their father and they were going to go through life without one of their parents, then I had to do everything and be everything for everybody. And although that is a coping skill I've learned, and so I just dove into say everything. I said yes to everything. I got way overcommitted, and I really didn't take care of myself. And that's kind of what has led into my practice, if you will, because that part of my personality, when you dive in and you give everything to everybody else and you don't create space to take care of yourself, then you get to a burnout phase and you just can't do it. And when you lose a spouse, it wasn't my job to become my children's father as well. But you have seen your baby suffer and be in pain and you just don't want to. So I kind of convinced myself that if I just do everything and say yes to everything, then my kids, maybe they won't miss a part of their life as much. Well, obviously that's silly. I mean, you lose your father, then you struggle in life and you struggle with that loss and nothing can fill that. And that's okay. And that's okay. And that habit of saying yes to everything, oh gosh, it exhausted me. And I had a little burnout phase for a while.
Now, it makes me think of the next question. Say somebody gets diagnosed with osteosarcoma or some sort of illness, or they're in an accident, they lose something. After going through what you've went through and working with so many people that have gone through something, some significant event, what's the first step to get going again?
This is what I advise or I work with my clients on. I think the first step is, one, I'm a big believer in sitting in the pain and in the pain that comes with a new reality. Because I think as human beings, our nature is to protect ourselves from pain. I've learned that is across the board with every client, with every family member, with every person I've worked with. We want to protect ourselves from pain because pain is horrific to live with day in and day out. And so consequently, we do all these different things, or we go to these different groups, and they're all good things. But true healing can only begin when we first sit in the pain and begin to accept our new reality, let the pain wash over us, and not be afraid of the changes, afraid of how our life looks different, afraid now of what the future holds, afraid we're not going to be the same, afraid of all the things that happen when you have trauma or something like that, is that you just kind of want to somehow make it better in the midst of this horrific thing that's happened. And that's a really good desire, but true healing only comes when we first sit in the pain and we don't run from it and we face it. That is, and when I share with my clients and I help them to get to that point, it's as if this huge burden is lifted off their shoulders, their family's shoulders, that we don't have to make it better right yet. Because that's a tremendous pressure to live with every single day. Well, this horrible thing happened and I just have to make it better. And that's a great goal, and we can get there and make it better, but you want it to be a genuine, true, authentic healing. And first you have to sit in the pain, I think. Not a popular viewpoint, but it's true.
It's totally Zen-like though, right? Don't chase the emotions away, be with it, be present.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But when you said pain, I was watching you tell your story. In fact, a few of us, and you were talking about how you went to the closet, you touched his clothes, and you fell to the ground. And I could feel that pain. And I think at some point, many of us have felt that pain, like to a level where you just drop and you're just like, this is it. Like is that the realm then at that point where you accept that I don't have to make it better right now. I can just sit here and just live with this right now.
Yeah. For me, in that moment, in the quiet of my home, my children were at school, and I had finally come home from the hospital, and the doctor was like, "You have to go shower, go like collect yourself, whatever." And I just had some moments by myself in my house, and walking upstairs to our bedroom and just realizing, oh my God, my life is just, it's what has happened, and just allowing it all to wash over me. Yes, my natural response was, okay, we're going to fight this. We're going to find the best doctors. And I literally, in our bedroom, I was like, we're going to find the best doctors. We are young. There's a less than 5% chance of survival with his type of cancer, but somebody makes up that less than 5%, and it has to be us. We're like good people. We care about others, right? You go through all these things in your head. And I immediately did what my human response is that I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to make this better, and it's all going to be okay. This is just going to be a great story to tell about perseverance, blah, blah, blah. And I remember opening up that closet, and I literally ran my hands over my husband's clothes that were all like hanging, like his hanging shirts. And I realized in that moment, there is nothing I can do. And that's when I fell to the floor. And I think that I know for a fact for me, that was a life-changing moment of complete and total surrender, that I was going to have to do all sorts of things, but they were going to be totally different than what my natural reaction is, because I can't control this. I can't do this. And I never thought of myself as a control freak. I still am like, in my therapy and stuff, I was like, am I a control freak? I don't really see that in any other areas of my life. And my counselors were like, no, but when you have trauma, then you typically try to then control the situation. And that's when I learned, like, okay, surrender, Kendra. You have to surrender, because this is going to get worse, is what I kind of realized. And you're just going to have to go through it. And your strength is going to be found in simply going through it and being authentic and real in the process.
There's a paradox in that. Well, there's a paradox in that feeling of first you have no control. When you realize you have no control in life, there's so many things you have no control over. And, and when you realize that can be frightening, but at the same time, eventually it might be, for me, I found it freeing, where I just give up trying to solve everything.
Totally. You're 100% right. Our culture has kind of fed us this like whole thing of lies that if we do everything, quote, right in our life, then we should just have a good life. And although we all want to believe that because that feels really good, the reality is you're 100% right. There is so much in this life that we can't control, but we don't like that.
No,
we
don't.
We work hard. We go to the right school. We meet the right person. We get the right job. We make a certain amount of money. We live here. We do this. We do that. Life is just going to be good. And I'm all for what I believe, all of it is so that we can protect ourselves from any kind of pain or rejection or being left out or not being the most popular or whatever it is. But it all stems down to that. And so therefore we have a really hard time accepting, like, there's so much in life we can't control. And we just have to learn to have the skills to deal with it.
Well, how do you deal with, you have a traumatic situation, you have something, whatever, you have something horrible happen. How do you deal with not living in that history, not reliving those moments?
I think time is one of the biggest things. I think also, I think really facing the fear. So one of the things when I was helping my kids, of course they talk to other professionals and stuff, but one of the most powerful things that I would do with my children is, again, help them to sit in the pain and not run from it, and really talk about what is the pain, what is the fear. And when we face those things, and I help my clients do this as well, like, let's go to the nth degree. What is the thing that makes you feel the most sick? What's the thing that, like, in your gut? What's the thing that makes you so afraid? Like, what are you so afraid of? What's the worst thing in this whole trauma? And when we begin to talk about that and put words to that and explore it and break it apart, then it doesn't have so much power over us, and we can begin the healing process. But fear of the unknown, fear of what it's going to be like now that there's been this big change, I really believe, and I know research supports this, but I really believe in my own experience of coaching, that when a traumatic event happens, fear takes over. It's hard when you lose your spouse at a young age to then just believe in kind of the goodness or really open yourself up to loving again, even your own family. Because what if I lose somebody else again, right? And so this is something that I've discovered as I've worked with clients with all different issues with loss. Like, what if this bad thing happens, or what if something else happens and I feel this pain and this brokenness again? And I really believe that fear is what keeps us from really going to those deep places, because it's just so difficult. But when we do, then we realize that we have so much more power than we thought we did before to really bring healing and a new approach to life.
Discovering that resiliency is a very difficult process, like you're saying, though. It's a very frightening process. Wow. I think of Matthew Haddon, who I interviewed. He unfortunately did pass away, but he was facing some really difficult stuff, obviously. And I said, how do you deal with the fear? And he said, Maggie's Place, this center in England it really provides support with folks with cancer. They're an incredible center, by the way. And they said to, one of the counselors, one of the support reps, I don't know what to label them as, told him, boiled it down to, you're quantum leaping. You're going way down the road right now. What do you want to do today? And for him, it was, for him, he's like, I want to hang out with my cat or whatever it was. And I want to have a beer, have a sandwich, do whatever. And I thought that was a really good approach to stop quantum leaping, getting into that time machine. For you Back to the Future fans, your DeLorean, and going back and forth and figuring out what the past was and what the future is. It's really difficult.
Yeah, but what a powerful thing to say. Absolutely. I think one of the crazy gifts that we get when we've gone through trauma is to learn to live in today. I mean, with one of my oldest is off to college in a different state. My twins are graduating this year, and they're looking at schools all over the country as well. And my 3 babies who suffered so much when they were younger, now they're going to be like in a totally different state than I am. And your brain can go nutso about the what ifs. Oh my gosh. Right? And that can drive you nutso. But when you stay in the day and you stay present, then you just enjoy today. And you appreciate today, recognizing, oh my gosh, everything could change tomorrow. So I don't even have control over tomorrow. So I don't know in 12 months. So let's just be present today and laugh and have fun. And, and it changes the way you do life.
Yeah.
And things that maybe were a big deal before just are like, well, it's not really that big of a deal. And I'm just going to go with it.
Well, you said it changes the way you approach life or do life. After your experience, what's the best investment you made? It could be financial, it could be personal, it could be whatever. What's the best investment you made after you went through all of that?
Oh my gosh, the best investment I made. Well, that's a really great question. I would say the best investment I have made was to simply slow down and just be with my kids. The summer after my husband passed away, and I'm very fortunate that I had the ability to do this. My parents have a house in the mountains, and we just went and we were there for the summer. And the purpose that I had was, one, we're going to face these fears, all the things I'm talking about, use this, like the skills to just dive right in to the pain of the grief, and then just be together. And like, if we feel like laughing, we laugh. If we feel like crying, we cry. If I want to walk downtown and get a drink, I'm going to do that. And we're going to be at the lake, and we're going to be by the water, and we're going to just be with no agenda. And when you have kids that are involved in sports, and you're a mom, and you, whatever, there's always an agenda. And I think the best investment I made was to say to my kids, like, hey, this is about us healing in a positive and authentic way. And I think we just need to be together. And I'm so thankful that I did that. I've asked my kids, now that they're older, I have an 18-year-old and 2 17-year-olds now, and they will say that they believe they really have had a healthy experience in losing their dad. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about him writing college essays and doing applications, and knowing that this is just part of your story and who you are is painful, and grief rears its ugly head all the time. That's just the way it is. But learning to be okay with that, and learning, because of what we kind of did from the very beginning, of just being okay in grief and pain, even though our culture doesn't know how to talk about it or deal with it, learning how to deal with it and talk about it and cry even in public, and be able to articulate feelings was probably the best and most important time I have ever spent in dealing with after the loss of my husband.
You speak a lot about health and wellness. In fact, when I was researching you, I was about to eat like a horribly unhealthy meal. And then I felt so damn guilty. I was like, I can't do this. I'm going to go have to eat like something much better. And yeah, because your site is full of health and wellness too. How integral was that? Does this go hand in hand with the grieving process, do you think? How integral was that for you?
Well, back to some of the mistakes I made. When I poured everything into everybody else, I had stopped taking care of myself. So when my husband was first diagnosed, I was actually training for the Boston Marathon. You have to qualify with a certain time. So I was a big runner, taking care of myself, all that good stuff. When he was diagnosed, I became all about caretaking him, my children, and making sure everybody in the family, my in-laws, my parents, our siblings, everybody else was okay. That I kind of forgot to take care of myself. And what happens, especially when we're grieving or when we're going through any kind of life change or a loss, is that so often we forget to take care of ourselves because we're so inundated with all this other new emotional stuff. And so I am really a big believer in we have to carve out time to take care of ourselves. We get one body, one life, and it's important that we take care of it. Now, with that being said, part of what I think has led, at least my clients say, to my success is that I'm a big believer in moderation. So this girl right here who believes in health and wellness, you want to go get chips and salsa and a cocktail? I'm in. That's what I love to do. So I don't believe in like being extreme about anything, but I believe that it's so important to fuel our body with good whole foods, to work out, to get some exercise. And if you have injuries, there's other things that you can do. But you can, even if you can't move your body, then you can still focus on how you're fueling your body so that you are still making your body work at its optimum and at its maximum, even if you can't actually move your body. This summer, I had a neck and back injury that reared its ugly head, and I literally was sidelined. I couldn't really work on my computer, on my phone. I couldn't really work with clients. I couldn't work out at all for like 8 weeks. And I know for some of your listeners, like they're like, well, screw you. I am in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. So I'm not at all comparing that. But when I couldn't work out for 8 weeks, I focused completely on my nutrition. And that didn't mean like I never had any sweets or I never had my chips and salsa or cocktails. I have put together some meal plans and some focused nutrition plans, and I could still stay healthy and feel my body, working at its maximum and in a great way without having to work out. So I think when we take care of our body, I know my whole business is about, and what I help people with is being healthy from the inside out. So again, it's kind of counterculture where our culture says it's all about how you look, how much you weigh, what you appear like. And true health and healing comes when we're focused on the inside as well as the outside.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
our culture's kind of messed right now.
So it's totally messed. And so a lot of my clients, they begin to be able to really go through the healing process from grief when they start to take care of themselves. It's like we're starting to just put the pieces of this puzzle of this life that's been like thrown up in the air and everything's fallen apart. We're putting pieces back together and we're building strength to face this new life. And that starts with saying, one, I'm worth it. I deserve to fuel my body properly. I deserve to be strong and capable in whatever way I can. And then I feel like that also leads to us being able to address emotional issues. And it's kind of this whole package thing of really focusing on all of the mind, body.
Now that you've gone through so much, now that you've seen so many people go through so much, and going through the process of losing something or a loved one, what do you know now that you didn't know prior that you haven't shared with us yet when going through the process that you wish you knew?
Here's what I know, like deep in my core, that each one of us is so much stronger than we think we are. And we have all the tools we need to be healthy. We have all the tools we need to get through a really difficult time. There's no magic potion, anything to getting through difficult times or to being healthy. We just have to go through it, and sometimes we need support and encouragement along the way. But each one of us is going to face difficulty in life, and each one of us is so much stronger than we think. And sometimes we just have to take a step back and learn who we are, understand ourselves a little better, and tap in to what we already have.
That's really cool. It makes me think this question, though. If you're a 20-something, say you have a room full of 20-somethings, the world hasn't completely beaten them down yet. You know, they haven't really gotten too jaded with everything. They're starting a major career or whatever it is, a real career. And they're there. They're a captive audience to you. What would you tell them in terms of how to approach life now? Like, how would you, or what would you say when it comes to approaching life? It could be philosophically or whatever. What would you tell them?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. What would I tell a group of 20-year-olds? I recently spoke to some 20-year-olds, and the message I gave to them was this, and this is what I also believe. I recognize we all come from different faiths. This is what I told them, but here's what I know is that they have been created by, in my view, it's God, the Creator. And they are loved and they are enough regardless of what anyone on this earth tells them, regardless of how much is in their bank account, what kind of job they have, what kind of car they drive. None of that defines who they are. And so often in life, especially these 20-year-olds, especially our younger kids, they search after these things that they think are going to fill them. And so when life throws curveballs or when the tough times come, they don't know what to do. And so what I want 20-year-olds to know is that none of those external things define you. That it's so important in life to know who you are, to go after the things that fill your soul and that set your heart on fire and live that, even if it's different or it doesn't make a ton of money, or even if it's different than what your peers are doing or what your parents did, because chasing after those external things are never, ever going to fill you up, make you feel valuable. And so we get one chance at this life, and we've got to go after what sets our soul on fire and live according to that, as opposed to what all these other expectations are.
That's awesome. That's a great message. It really is. Now for yourself, I wonder where are you going in the future? What are your plans?
Oh my gosh, that's a good question too.
I
right?
load them up. I do. I load these questions up.
I know. You're making me think. Where am I going? Here, I am absolutely passionate about getting the message to every single human being that you're not alone in this world and that you're enough. I work with, like I said, people all over the world. And the universal thing that I hear from people, regardless of what kind of loss they have, is this fear that somehow they're not doing enough or they're not enough in this lifetime because of the messages that have been sent over the years to most people. And I think it's so important. Again, my message is that you already have the skills that you need to lose weight, to be healthy. I'm just going to help tap into those, right? And give you really specific tools, but inside you have the ability. Or if you're grieving, or you've had a loss, that you're not alone and that you are enough in this world, regardless of what has happened to you. And that most importantly, you're not defined by how much money, how successful your kids are, how successful you are. You are enough simply because you were created by the Creator, and that gives you value. And I really believe when we start to live in that truth, then we do life differently. We slow down. We enjoy friends. We let things that family members do that could really hurt us, we let it roll off our back a little better. When people hurt us, when jobs don't work out the way that we want, we have a better perspective. When we struggle financially, or we are all the things that realistically happen in life, we have a different perspective because we're not trying to prove ourselves that we're enough. We're not trying to prove that we deserve to be a part of this group or a part of that group or whatever. I've worked with clients that have millions and millions and millions of dollars and they're miserable. And to the entire world, we live in Silicon Valley, they're CEOs of companies, they have everything, and they're miserable because they have let the external things of this life define them. And that will never make you happy. It just won't.
Yeah, it is. It's a pretty incredible message. Yeah, you're in the epicenter. You're in one of the few areas in the country where you could really probably interact with folks that are like very wealthy, and seeing how they react to a bad situation or their self-worth in spite of the money is probably a pretty interesting case study. You know?
Yeah, it's been really interesting because we again, our culture's made us believe if we have a certain job, if we work for a certain company, if we have a certain amount in our bank account, if our marriage looks like this, if our kids look like a certain way, if our family photo looks a certain way, then we've got it all, and we're going to be accepted and included in everything, and we're going to feel ultimately really great in our heart. And that lasts for some time, for sure. Everyone often gets swept up in it, but when the trouble comes, or when some sort of heartache or loss comes, which every human being will experience, then so often we're ill-equipped to deal with that. And all of a sudden, all the things that defined us, that made us accepted and worthy according to the world, don't really matter. And that's where people have this this kind of traumatic or it can be a traumatic moment or an aha moment of those things don't really define me. How I face my fear, how I deal with my loss, how I love, how I grieve, like who I am as a person, and the knowledge that my value is simply because I'm a human being created by the Creator. It just changes the perspective, and it gives us freedom to make mistakes, to not be perfect, to love deeper, to give grace to the people in our life. And that leads to a more fulfilling life. It just does. Because you can't run from pain. You can't run from pain and grief. It'll hit every single person, regardless of their status or their worth.
That is true.
To the world.
Grieving is something everybody's going to do. So, everybody's going to grieve at some point.
Mm-hmm. At some point. So, you can't base the value of your life based on all these other things. Because when those deep, dark, horrific moments hit, which so many of your listeners have already been through and they know, that's when you take a step and take a real good look at your own life. And that's where people are when they call me.
I was going to say,
it's like, oh, yeah.
Well, you're in a business of difficult things. And so when reaching out to you, you have your website. I'm going to link everything in social media, and then all your social media, your websites, everything will be in our show notes, listeners. So chill out, just click the show notes, and there's going to be links there. You don't have to write anything down. So just calm down while you're listening.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we'll have everything there. And what is the best way to work with you? How to at least make contact with you to work with you?
So I still believe in I'm just a regular person. So the best thing to get with me, you'll see on my website, there's a form to fill out, and there's also my email. So if that is something that you are, if you want to work together, and there's a place for health and wellness coaching, and there's a place for grief coaching, here's the reality. It all comes to my inbox. I do have an assistant, but I look at everything myself. So I work a lot of hours, but it's really important to me with something this personal that if people are willing to trust me with what they're going through, then they deserve me and my heart and my attention. So I look at every email. I look at every text. I look at every comment on my Facebook or my Instagram because I really believe that each life matters, and you deserve, if you're reaching out to me, the best of me. So you can fill out the form, and if you fill out the wrong form, it's okay. then we'll get in contact and I'll give, we'll end up most likely talking on the phone or emailing back and forth a little bit. And then we talk on the phone and then we can start sessions if that's what you want to do.
That's really cool. You can tell you have a big heart, and it's there.
Thank you.
I really appreciate what you're doing, and I appreciate what you share, because I get to see it. I get to see it in social media, and I've seen it in your writings, and I think that you have a lot to offer, and we really appreciate you even sharing this much. It's really awesome that you would do that. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, Scott, thank you so much for reaching out to me, and thank you so much for what you're doing and the service that you are giving to so many and the encouragement that you're giving to so many. And thank you for, finding what I do worthy enough to have on your show. I really, really appreciate it.
That's our episode. Just a quick reminder that you can find more about any guest and all things Living Adaptive, such as previous episodes, guest contact info, show notes, and a bunch of other good stuff at www.livingadaptive.com. Go there. Talk to you soon. Peace.